Good evening. Tonight we're tracking a story that hasn't made headlines yet, but it will. When Finnish authorities seized a Russian oil tanker in the Baltic Sea, the world focused on oil prices and geopolitical tensions. Analysts debated sanctions enforcement, diplomats issued carefully worded statements, and traders positioned themselves for the obvious play: higher crude prices. But there's another story unfolding beneath the surface, one that threatens a critical metal most people never think about until it's too late: silver. Tonight, we'll show you how one seized tanker could trigger a global silver shortage, and why almost nobody sees it coming. We'll trace the connections that link maritime insurance markets to mine closures halfway around the world. We'll examine why industrial users are quietly panicking, and we'll explain why this isn't speculation. It's a chain reaction already in motion. Let's establish the facts of what actually happened. Today, Finnish authorities detained the Eagle S, a Russian-flagged oil tanker, in the Baltic Sea. The official reason: suspected involvement in damaging an undersea power cable connecting Finland and Estonia. The vessel was escorted to Finnish waters, its crew detained, and its cargo, thousands of barrels of Russian oil, effectively frozen. On the surface, this appears to be a straightforward enforcement action: one vessel, one violation, one response. But in the world of international shipping and commodity finance, there's no such thing as an isolated incident. Within hours of the seizure, risk assessment teams at major insurance underwriters convened emergency meetings. Shipping companies rerouted vessels. Banks reassessed their exposure to commodity trade finance. And quietly, behind closed doors, the calculus that governs trillions of dollars in global trade began to shift. Let's talk about what's happening right now in the maritime insurance markets, a story unfolding largely out of public view. Maritime insurance is highly specialized. Underwriters assess risk based on historical data, shipping routes, vessel conditions, cargo types, and geopolitical stability. They price policies accordingly, often dealing with premiums in the millions of dollars for a single voyage. The Baltic Sea incident has fundamentally altered their risk models. If authorities in a stable country like Finland can seize a commercial vessel in international waters, even if entirely justified under international law, then what does that mean for vessels operating in more contested waters? What about tankers transiting the South China Sea, where territorial disputes simmer constantly? What about bulk carriers moving through the Strait of Hormuz? What about vessels with any connection to sanctioned entities or disputed territories? We've confirmed with sources in the London maritime insurance market that premiums for certain routes have already increased by 40 to 60%. Some underwriters are declining coverage altogether for vessels with Russian connections, regardless of cargo or destination. But here's the critical point: most coverage is missing. This insurance crisis doesn't discriminate by commodity type. A premium increase for an oil tanker creates the same premium increase for a bulk carrier transporting zinc concentrate. A risk reassessment for Russian vessels creates ripple effects for any ship operating in geopolitically sensitive regions. And that's where the silver story begins. Now, many viewers might be asking, what does shipping insurance have to do with silver? The connection lies in how silver is actually produced, a fact that surprises most people when they first learn it. 35% of the world's silver, more than one-third of total production, doesn't come from primary silver mines at all. It's a byproduct of mining other metals: zinc, lead, and copper. Here's how it works. Certain ore deposits contain multiple metals mixed together. These are called polymetallic deposits. When mining companies extract zinc, they often find the ore also contains lead, copper, and yes, silver. The same smelting and refining processes that extract the primary metals also recover the silver. This byproduct silver represents roughly 280 million ounces per year, a massive amount of supply that exists only because of zinc, lead, and copper mining operations. Now here's where geography becomes critical. These polymetallic deposits are heavily concentrated in specific regions: Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, Kazakhstan, and Russia. These aren't stable, developed economies with robust infrastructure. They're countries facing varying degrees of political instability, infrastructure challenges, and now the same shipping and insurance complications triggered by the Baltic Sea incident. Let me give you a specific example. Peru is the world's second largest silver producer, and much of that production comes from polymetallic mines in remote mountain regions. The ore is extracted, then transported, often by truck over dangerous roads, to coastal ports. From there, it's loaded onto ships bound for smelters in Asia or North America. Every step of that journey now faces increased scrutiny from insurers. The trucks need insurance, the port facilities need insurance, the ships definitely need insurance, and the companies financing these operations need assurance that their collateral, millions of dollars worth of metal concentrates, will actually reach its destination. When insurance costs spike, when banks hesitate to issue letters of credit, when shipping companies demand higher rates to compensate for perceived risk, the economics of these complex international supply chains begin to collapse. Let's talk about mining economics, because this is where the chain reaction accelerates. Mining operations run on thin margins, especially for byproduct metals. A zinc mine doesn't decide to operate based on silver prices, it operates based on zinc prices. The silver revenue is welcome, but it's secondary to the main business case. So what happens when the cost of getting that zinc concentrate from the mine to the smelter suddenly increases by 40, 50, or 60% due to shipping and insurance complications? The mine's profit margin evaporates. And here's the critical decision point. Does the company continue operating at a loss, hoping conditions improve? Or does it shut down operations, preserve capital, and wait for better economics? Industry sources tell us that several major mining companies are conducting exactly these assessments right now. They're running financial models, stress testing their supply chains, and calculating the break-even point where continued operations no longer make economic sense. We've confirmed that at least 3 significant polymetallic mining operations in Peru and Mexico have already entered what's called care and maintenance mode. That's industry terminology for a controlled shutdown, where the mine isn't permanently closed but isn't actively producing either. Here's why this matters for silver. When a zinc mine shuts down, its byproduct silver production doesn't just decrease, it goes to zero, immediately. Let's put some numbers to this. If we're talking about 3 or 4 major operations going into care and maintenance and each produces 2 to 3 million ounces of silver annually as a byproduct, we're looking at 10 to 12 million ounces of supply that simply vanishes from the market. But it gets worse, because mining operations don't restart quickly. When a mine shuts down, you can't just flip a switch a few months later and resume production. Underground workings need to be maintained. Equipment needs to be serviced. Skilled workers find other jobs. Permits need to be renewed. Supply contracts need to be renegotiated. Industry experts estimate it takes 12 to 24 months minimum to bring a mothballed mine back to full production. Some operations never restart at all. So we're not talking about a temporary supply disruption. We're talking about a multi-year supply deficit. This brings us to what commodities analysts are calling the secondary supply cliff. And it's a phenomenon that almost nobody is properly modeling in their silver forecasts. Most silver market analysis focuses on primary drivers: industrial demand from solar panels and electric vehicles, investment demand from retail buyers, central bank policies affecting precious metals, and production from dedicated silver mines. Those are all legitimate factors. But they're missing the elephant in the room: the fragility of byproduct supply chains in an era of increasing geopolitical instability. Let me walk you through the cascade of events already in motion. Stage 1. The insurance crisis makes shipping from geopolitically unstable regions prohibitively expensive or, in some cases, impossible to insure at any price. Stage 2. Zinc, lead, and copper mines in these regions find their operations suddenly uneconomical, not because metal prices have crashed, base metal prices remain relatively strong, but because the cost of transportation has exploded. Stage 3. These mines begin shutdown procedures. Some announce it publicly. Others do it quietly, simply reducing production schedules and laying off workers. Stage 4. Silver production, which was a byproduct of these operations, evaporates. Not gradually, not predictably, but suddenly, as each mine crosses its individual break-even threshold. Conservative estimates suggest 30 to 40 million ounces of annual silver supply could be at risk from this chain reaction. That represents 8 to 10% of total global silver production of roughly 830 million ounces per year. But here's what makes this a cliff rather than a gradual decline. These ounces don't disappear evenly over time. They disappear in chunks as individual operations shut down. 3 million ounces gone when a Peruvian mine closes, 5 million more when a Mexican operation suspends, 2 million more when a Kazakh smelter can't get concentrate shipments. The silver market, already operating with very little slack in the system, has no capacity to absorb this kind of sudden supply loss. Now let's shift our focus from supply to demand, because this is where the situation transforms from a shortage into a full-blown crisis. Silver isn't primarily an investment metal like gold. It's an industrial metal with critical applications across multiple sectors. Solar panel manufacturing consumes approximately 140 million ounces of silver annually, and that number is growing as renewable energy expansion accelerates worldwide. Each solar panel requires silver paste for the photovoltaic cells that convert sunlight to electricity. There is no cost-effective substitute that matches silver's electrical conductivity and reliability. The automotive industry, particularly electric vehicle production, requires silver for charging systems, battery management systems, and the hundreds of electrical contacts in modern vehicles. As EV production ramps up globally, silver demand from this sector continues to climb. The electronics industry depends on silver for circuit boards, switches, and contacts in everything from smartphones to data centers. Medical device manufacturers need silver for its antimicrobial properties in wound dressings, catheters, and surgical instruments. These aren't optional uses. These are critical applications where silver's unique properties make it irreplaceable in many applications. And here's the crucial point. These industrial users operate on contracts. A solar panel manufacturer has agreements to deliver panels to utility companies. An automaker has production schedules with dealers waiting for vehicles. An electronics company has orders from major retailers. When silver becomes unavailable, these production lines don't just slow down, they stop. So imagine you're the procurement manager at a major solar panel manufacturer. You've been buying silver at $28 to $30 per ounce. Your production is humming along. Your contracts are being fulfilled. Then, suddenly, your regular suppliers can't deliver. The refineries they work with aren't getting concentrates from the smelters. The smelters aren't getting ore from the mines. And when you try to find alternative suppliers, you discover that physical silver is simply unavailable at any reasonable price. What do? You have two choices: shut down production and breach your contracts, or pay whatever it takes to secure the silver you need. Industry sources tell us this scenario is already playing out. Procurement managers at major industrial users are quietly panicking, building inventory where possible, and preparing for bidding wars over available supply. This brings us to the inevitable consequence: a bidding war. But this won't be a speculative frenzy. This will be industrial users with billions of dollars at stake competing for physical metal they need to keep their operations running. In normal markets, silver trades with a relatively small premium over spot price. If the spot price is $30 per ounce, you might pay $32 or $33 for physical delivery. During previous supply stress periods, we've seen those premiums expand to $5 or even $8 over spot. That's unusual but manageable. What happens when 8 to 10% of supply disappears and industrial users need every ounce they can get? The spot price becomes increasingly disconnected from the physical market. Dealers begin quoting premiums of $10, then $15, then $20 over spot. Some products become unavailable at any premium. Conservative analysts suggest spot silver could reach $50 to $60 per ounce in a true supply crisis scenario. That's roughly double current prices. More aggressive forecasts suggest triple-digit prices aren't impossible if the shortage persists for multiple quarters. But here's what's really important. By the time prices reach those levels, physical availability becomes the constraint, not price. It doesn't matter if you're willing to pay $60 or $80 or $100 per ounce if there's simply no metal available for immediate delivery. This is what market observers mean when they say this is a systemic shortage, not a speculative one. At this point, some viewers are probably thinking, won't we see the same thing with oil? And won't governments intervene? Let's compare the two commodities directly. Oil has strategic petroleum reserves. The United States alone holds roughly 370 million barrels specifically designed to buffer against supply disruptions. Other major economies have similar stockpiles. Silver has virtually no strategic stockpiles. Some government mints hold silver for coin production, but we're talking about millions of ounces, not hundreds of millions. Oil has alternative supply routes. If Baltic Sea shipping becomes problematic, oil can be transported by pipeline, rail, or through alternative shipping lanes. Silver's supply chains, particularly for byproduct production, are highly specific. You can't easily reroute ore from a Peruvian mine through a different smelter. Oil has substitution possibilities. If prices spike sufficiently, countries can increase coal usage, accelerate nuclear operations, or implement conservation measures. Silver has no meaningful substitutes for most industrial applications. Engineers have spent decades trying to find alternatives in electronics and solar panels. Some exist, but with significant performance compromises, and perhaps most importantly, oil commands immediate political attention. When oil prices spike, it affects gasoline prices, which affects voters. Silver operates below the political radar. Most people don't think about silver supply. By the time policymakers recognize there's a crisis, industrial users will have already secured whatever supply remains available, likely at extraordinary prices. Let's step back and examine why this situation is fundamentally different from previous silver shortage narratives. Over the years, there have been many predictions of silver shortages. Chinese demand growth, solar panel expansion, investment flows, central bank policies, even social media-driven short squeezes. What we're describing tonight is fundamentally different. This is a supply-driven crisis, emerging from the physical infrastructure of global trade. This isn't about retail investors trying to squeeze the market. It's not about central banks manipulating prices. It's not about Chinese industrial demand or solar panel growth rates. This is about the physical infrastructure of global commodity shipping facing a trust collapse, and silver, because of its unique position as a byproduct metal sourced from geopolitically unstable regions via complex international supply chains, sits directly in the path of the storm.